Okay, and I think we're good to go. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our Know Your Rights presentation on Heir property owner rights. My name is Ileana Riojas, project coordinator for our community housing rights team here at Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid in our San Antonio office. Before we start, let's provide instructions for folks how to access the interpretation line. Give me 1 second, okay. I'm going to switch into Spanish. Si usted habla español y prefiere escuchar esta transmisión en español, lo puede hacer por medio de Zoom. Tiene que estar conectado por computadora bajo el portal de Zoom para seleccionar la opción de interpretación. Next slide, please. Okay. Como vemos en la pantalla, usted puede ver hay una barra de herramientas en medio y en donde dice interpretación, usted puede seleccionar español para poder escuchar esta transmisión en español. Okay, I'm so sorry. I'm having technical difficulties right now with my computer. Ok, como estaba comentando ahorita, en el centro hay una barra de herramientas con varias opciones. Seleccione la que dice interpretación, haga clic y seleccione español. María Murray estará interpretando la transmisión el día de hoy en español. Muchas gracias, María, por estar con nosotros de nuevo esta noche. Joining us today is Commissioner Calvert from District 4, who would like to share the following message with you all. Welcome, Commissioner. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Mr. Riojas, and thank you to everyone at Texas Rural Legal Aid for everything that you do today. This is a very important moment, and I'm just so grateful to give a couple of welcoming words because of how important it is. We all are aware of what happens in communities with respect to gentrification and the increase of taxes and scrupulous vulture capitalist tactics to get people's property. And tonight we really, I think, are at a turning point of reclaiming our communities for those who have endured and those who have had legacy there. I have heard from constituents, thanks to Texas Rural Legal Aid, that have been exploited and harassed. And I wanted to stand with Texas Rural Legal Aid tonight to just say that should anyone in the community ever be the victim of these unscrupulous business tactics by folks in the real estate community who are trying to take folks' homes from under them, they can always call our office. So I just wanted to extend our number, 210-335-2614. We will work in partnership to put you in contact with Texas Rural Legal Aid. I am willing to go all the way to the Texas Bar in Austin or beyond for the constituents of Precinct 4 to hold accountable with the law license or with any kind of license that we can for folks who are being crooks and trying to take people's properties from under them. So the good news is we're going to be empowered tonight with some great information that I hope you all will share with others in the community. So thank you for your vision to put this night together, and I look forward to the results of us coming together as a community and saying we are not going to allow folks to be vulture capitalists and steal the rightful property of those who have been in the community for generations. Thank you all for the opportunity to say a few words.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Calvert, again, for being here today with us. And switching up, let's go a little bit of who we are. Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid provides free civil legal services to low-income Texas residents in 68 counties of Central, South, and Southwest areas. We cover different civil law practice areas such as housing, family, consumer, employment, wills and estates, and many other areas as well. Now, as you can see on the screen, there's also a number in our website that you can call. It's 888-988-9996 if you want to apply for our services. And our website is trala.org/ /help. It gives you more information on the type of services we provide the communities here in Texas and how you can apply for our services as well. All right, so let me introduce you to the women with us today who will be leading this segment. Housing attorney Lisbeth Barra Davila and Cristina Trejo. Hi, Lisbeth and Cristina, how are you guys doing today?
Hi, good. Thank you for having us.
Hey there, doing good. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Next slide, please. I wanted to just give everybody some feedback how we're going to be answering questions tonight. So you can definitely place your questions as we go in the chat or in the Q&A section right below on your toolbar for Zoom. You can also text us your question at 210-212-3703. I'll repeat, 210-212-3703. Currently, right now, everybody's muted, but we'll also give you an option to either ask your questions to these platforms, or in the future, when we get closer to the end of the presentation, there's going to be a segment where you could also follow up with questions. Quick disclaimer that the following is legal information and not legal advice. Due to confidentiality protections, we ask that you not share personal information with us or ask any question related to your own personal legal issue. If you would like to apply for help, please contact us separately, and you can do that by calling the 210-212-3703 phone number, or you can email us at righttocounsel@trla.org. Okay, so let's get started. So Liz, can you give us a quick overview of the topics we will be covering today?
Yes, Ileana. So like Commissioner Calvert mentioned, today we're going to be discussing some ways that Heir property owners can protect themselves from vulture capitalists, and talk about some things they can do if right now they are at risk of losing their home. So all throughout Bexar County, we are seeing rising property values and rapid redevelopment. And as homes become less available, we start to see sleazy developers use all sorts of tactics to rob homeowners of what is, for many, the greatest asset that they have. They're targeting homeowners who are behind on their taxes or who have had code enforcement called on them. They're preying on the Heir property owners by reaching out to family members who own part of the home but don't live in it to convince them or trick them into selling their ownership interest. And we are here today to provide some tips on what to do in these situations. We also want to help Heir property owners save money on their taxes, and we will be covering how they can do this.
Great. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about who is an Heir property homeowner. Cristina, can you explain a little bit of what an Heir property owner is?
Sure, absolutely. So an Heir property owner is someone who owns real property. When we say real property, we're talking about land either with a home on it or without a home on it, but the point is that it's land. And so an Heir property owner inherited this land or home either by will or without a will, but essentially the titled owner of their property passed on. And so the Heir property owner owns it because of that. And they received it either through that will or without a will, or sometimes through a special type of deed that's used to pass on a home when someone passes away.
Great, thank you for the explanation. So Lisbeth and Cristina, what are some things Heir property owners can do to protect themselves from predatory investor developers?
Well, I'm glad that you asked that, because as a housing attorney, I mean, I deal a lot with landlord-tenant issues, but homes themselves are near and dear to my heart. You know, the situation with Heir property owners being taken advantage of is the primary reason that communities of color end up losing their homes. And it perpetuates the cycle of intergenerational poverty, because as Lisbeth mentioned earlier, homes are the greatest asset that we'll ever own. I don't know about you all, but I don't own any stocks. I don't own any bonds. You know, I have a car, but who knows how long that'll survive. The one thing that I have at the end of my life is going to be my home, and that's what I hope to pass on to my kids. So we do not want people losing their homes due to predatory lenders, or I've heard different adjectives used to describe the people that are taking advantage. I have a few myself, but I probably can't say them online. But the biggest way that people can take advantage, or not take advantage, but protect themselves from the predatory tactics that are used is to keep track of your family members. You know, if you happen, when there's a large family and the homeowner passes on, unfortunately, we see a lot of sometimes siblings being estranged. And if you have a brother that nobody in the family has spoken to for 3 years or something, say he drinks too much. And unfortunately, because public records are available to everyone nowadays, these predatory people and businesses will find out when the homeowner passes away, and they will use those public records to track down everybody that has an interest in that home. And then what they're going to do is find the weakest link and make an offer that that person either can't refuse, or scare that person into passing on their interest in the property. And what that means for the rest of the family is that the home is no longer owned free and clear. Liz, you want to follow up on that?
Yeah, I think in keeping an open line of communication with other heir property owners, others who inherited the home that you have inherited is important. So you can work something out with them, whether they're your siblings or your siblings' heirs. Figure out a way to establish ownership of the home so that you are not then targeted and susceptible to being pushed out by developers. Many times other heirs, don't live in the home, so they'd rather not pay the taxes or maintenance, in which case they may be willing to just pass on their ownership interest to you. So talk to them and figure out if something can be figured out. It's really important to communicate and have that already set out. Lack of estate planning is the main reason these problems come to be. So before you make someone else an heir property owner, also look at doing your own estate planning. There are resources online available so that you do not have to hire a lawyer, but we also have legal clinics available free for folks who cannot afford a lawyer but need one to figure out their situation. So keep an eye out, apply for services with legal aid if that's something that you anticipate you're gonna need. So just estate planning is the process of completing the legal documents needed if your family member becomes disabled or incapacitated, or in the case of death. And lack of estate planning is the reason lots of these issues come about. So look at drafting the last will and testament or transfer on death deed so that you can pass on property to your heirs in a way that doesn't make the ownership interest smaller and smaller. And like Christina said, more easier for developers to target you on.
Yeah, and if I can butt in a little bit, Liz, the time to reach out to your perhaps estranged siblings or not estranged is before it becomes a problem. So like if you have a family member who owns a home and it's going to be passing to a number of siblings together, it would be great if the family talked before the homeowner passes on. But if the homeowner does pass on and nobody's had that conversation, of course, for the love of God, reach out quick, because if you don't, somebody else is going to, I promise you. Like when I mentioned that these situations are the reason that people lose their homes, doesn't happen magically, like in a puff of smoke, like, oh, nobody agreed and bam, the land is lost. No, what happened is that somebody found them. Somebody found that weak link and reached out and found that person. And if anybody has ever experienced like telemarketing calls or even like a car sales. I mean, we all know what happens when someone is trying to force us to sign something or agree to something. They talk really fast and they say all these things that are designed to push your buttons, whether they're to scare you or entice you. And so one thing we see at Legal Aid a lot is when these predatory people will find that weak link and sweet talk them and tell them, oh, you know, if you do not sign away your interest, you're going to get stuck paying taxes. Or, oh, did you know that if you don't sign away your interest, you're going to be responsible for maintaining that home so that there are not code violations. And if you get a code violation, you're going to be responsible for it. And of course, all these things are not true. And what happens is that the person will end up signing, and then the home is encumbered and no longer an asset for the family. Anyway, I just want to kick that in.
Yeah, and speaking about, that, if you are given a document to sign, don't sign it. Don't sign what you don't understand. Lots of developers are approaching homeowners using threatening tactics and or just plainly deceiving them and giving documents for them to sign. Do not sign something that you do not understand. If someone approaches you and asks you to sign a document for whatever reason, ask them tell them you want to review the document with an attorney. And if once they push back, that's a red flag. Whether they say yeah, sure, either way, seek out legal advice. Like we mentioned, Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid is a nonprofit law firm that offers free legal services. Apply for assistance with us if that is something that you are facing or in the future face. Don't just blindly accept whatever they tell you, as convincing as they sometimes may be or sound.
Right. And, I have this rule of thumb that I never sign anything the day that it's presented to me. My family never stops making fun of me because I'm the one that irritates the snot out of everyone who provides me with something to sign. But you know what? I have a superpower, and so does everybody else on the planet. And their superpower is to say no and oh. If somebody wants you to sign something, fine. But you have the absolute, complete, and total right to not sign it that day. And yeah, you can tell them that you want to review it with an attorney, or you can just tell them that you want to review it, period. And like Liz said, if somebody is telling you, if you tell them that you don't want to sign it that day and they give you a bunch of reasons why you need to, I can guarantee you 99 times out of 100, it's because they are going to do something that is not going to be good for you. I think everybody here at some point in their life has signed something that they regretted signing, whether it be a 2-year cable contract or a car that they found they ended up overpaying for, or maybe a contract having to do with house repair. But the stakes are always different. And the biggest stake of all is going to be a home. I mean, you can't get any bigger than that. And so for that reason, use your superpower and say, no, you don't have to sign it that day. Take it away, review it, apply to us, show it to somebody in the family, or just use the simple smell test as to whether the person gets very upset or pushes back because you don't want to sign that day.
If you are also facing, threats that your house is going to be foreclosed on because you are delinquent in Texas, or you receive letters of this, don't go out and borrow money. Don't borrow money from developers because tax foreclosure cases actually take longer than they will tell you. So again, just seek out advice. So don't be a victim of predatory lending either.
Right. We see that at Legal Aid quite a bit, unfortunately. People will get behind on their property taxes and they think that they're going to lose their home tomorrow. And it's not like that at all. The appraisal district will work out payment plans with people. Believe me when I tell you, the city, the county, they do not want for the community to have homelessness. They're going to help to work something out. And so if you get behind on your taxes and you get this letter telling you it's going to solve your problems by paying your deficiency, I can promise you that what is going to happen, and you take them up on it, they will take your home way faster than the city or the county would, because the city and the county have a vested interest in making sure that our communities are stable and that people do not lose their homes because they're behind on their taxes. There are payment plans available. And there is a whole industry out there of people who go and research public records to see who's behind on their taxes. And then they do mail outs and they try and take advantage of people when they're in a vulnerable position. I hate to be a negative Nelly, but unfortunately, in life, because of our society is set up the way it is and our financial systems are set up the way they are, when we are experiencing hardship or transition or just anything that leads to some kind of a vulnerability, there's going to be a way for somebody out there to find that out by way of public record, and they're going to reach out to you. Even stuff like tickets. I don't know, I'm probably giving you too much information here, but I speed a lot. And it seems like every time I speed, I get all these offers from defensive driving places. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, how did the whole world find out about my latest ticket? And that's just a ticket. I can assure you that something as serious as being behind on anything having to do with your home is going to be sought out even more so by those who are looking to exploit it.
We have a question in the chat, Lisbeth and Christina, and let me try to rephrase it just a little bit. If there was a will, but the other spouse refused to sign because he wanted all the children to have equal share, both parents passed away, and only one sibling is paying taxes, does that mean that the property belonged to that sibling that's paying the taxes? Or is there still like an equal share of ownership interest with the other siblings?
Yeah, so I can answer that. There is still an equal share of ownership. So when somebody becomes an heir property owner, they all have the same responsibilities of paying the taxes. So that means that even though they weren't paying it, they were required to, and the person paying it doesn't become full owner just because they were paying it. You still, this is why we mentioned communicating with family members, because you are still all equally, they would still all equally share interest in the home. What they could do is seek reimbursement for those taxes for those years that they paid.
Thank you, Liz. All right, so I guess we can go into the next slide. What do I do if a developer claiming to own part of my home is threatening to sue me or has sued me?
Yeah, so these lawsuits are very complicated actions, and which is why we continue to recommend seeking legal advice because they're very complicated, and you don't want to attack it incorrectly. So apply for legal services in your area. Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid provides them for eligible homeowners in Bexar County. There are protections in place, however, for heir property owners. So if you are being sued, under a partition action, the current law gives heir property owners the right to buy out the person who filed the lawsuit. So this is supposed to protect those that face these lawsuits from developers who purchase another heir property owners and then are trying to buy out the others. Well, instead of the developer being able to buy out the heir property owners get to buy out that developer as long as they're not the ones bringing the lawsuit. This law also allows a court to take into account sentimental, cultural, and historical value of the property, as well as whether someone would become homeless because of this lawsuit. And if buying out the other owner's interest isn't possible, the heir property owner who didn't file the lawsuit would at least receive fair market value for their ownership interest. Be aware, though, that if a lawsuit is filed, there is a answer deadline that is typically 21 days.
That's so great. So in other words, the person who's getting sued because a family member probably got taken advantage of, essentially gets first dibs to buy the house, right?
Yes.
That's great. Has it always been like that?
No, this recent change in the law came to effect in 2018. So it hasn't been very long, and it's limited protection, but it's better than what we had before.
Right. I mean, the fact that they can take, the court can take into account sentimentality. I mean, goodness gracious, that is great that the legislature finally made some reform, right? Yeah.
Thank you, Liz and Christina. So as we were mentioning earlier, we've seen a lot of development coming into San Antonio, which means that a lot of folks are getting higher property taxes. Earlier, you mentioned you will be talking about how to save money on property taxes. Can you tell us more about that, please?
Yes, so I was referring to the homestead exemption. Recent changes in the law now make it possible for an heir property owner to receive a full homestead exemption, whereas before 2019, they were only receiving partial homestead exemption, which meant only partial savings. And Christina, can you explain quickly what a homestead exemption is?
No, I could try. I mean, essentially, it keeps your taxes from rising and rising and rising and rising. It creates a cap, so that it's a small percentage that the property value can be raised, because our taxes are based on the appraisal, so it limits it, and it makes all the difference. And I'd like to say, because I didn't even know about this, thank goodness you explained to me about this recent change. So before, when you said that the heirs property owners were only getting partial exemption, in other words, like if the person that was living in the home was the owner, but like say with five other heirs, they were only getting 1/6 of an exemption. Is that right? That's terrible. And so now they can get 100%.
Yes. And so this doesn't mean 100% of taxes are gone. This just means a bigger tax benefit.
Right, because of the exemption, that cap, right? Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's great. What else can we tell, I guess, the people about the exemption, about the homestead exemption?
So to qualify for the homestead exemption, they have to be owner of the property and must have lived in the home since January 1st of the year that they are applying. So it does require owning and living in the home. But like we mentioned, owning can mean being an heir property owner, so having inherited the home.
Right. And people throw around the word ownership really loosely. Like one question earlier, a lot of people think that just because your name is on the tax bill, that means you own it, but that's not really what it means at all. And you don't even have to have your ownership, quote unquote. I don't know if I'm on camera. I hope I'm not, but if I am, if I'm not, I'm making little quotation marks. You don't even have to, your ownership doesn't even have to be recorded like in the real property records. It's just that you own it. It hasn't been recorded yet, but a lot of times people pass on without wills, and then that could be 5 generations back, and you could have had another owner pass on without a will, and another one, and another one, and another one, and there's nothing recorded, but there is ownership, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And speaking of how to get the homestead exemption, as you can see on the slide, there is a picture of an application form. That is the form that you fill out to and complete and submit to the tax office to get that homestead application, a homestead exemption. If you go to the next slide, I can talk a little bit more about other requirements. So like I mentioned, you have to fill out that application, and it has to be taken or mailed to the tax office. And with that application, a ID or driver's license must be submitted of the property owner who's seeking the homestead exemption and lives in the home. For heir property owners, there's additional requirements, including taking a death certificate of the previous owner and the most recent utility bill, as well as an affidavit where you state that you are an heir owner. And this affidavit has been made into a form that is accessible and available in tax offices. And if we go to the next slide, it looks exactly like this. So this form is called the Residence Homestead Exemption Affidavit, and it has to be signed and notarized by the person who lives in the home and is an heir's property owner, and submitted to the tax office. So these are additional requirements for those who are heir property owners, but this will allow for a full homestead exemption to be available. And for many, this means thousands of dollars in savings. We have seen folks that didn't have the homestead exemption, they could have saved like over $10,000 or more, especially in areas like Bexar County, where we are seeing like property values just go up and up and up. So if you are an heirs property owner, make sure to fill out this application and live in the home, make sure to fill out this application and turn in the required materials to the tax office. Even if you had it before, remember that prior to 2019, it was only being given partially. So a new application needs to be submitted to access the full 100% homestead exemption.
Hey Liz, I have a question. So these additional requirements for an heir property owner, what is the difference with, I guess what would be our typical non-heir owner? Like somebody with an original mortgage, they don't have to provide all that additional documentation, in other words?
No, they would just have to fill out the application and take a driver's license or ID, unless there are some other circumstances. That's typically all that they need.
And that's usually because their ownership actually is recorded, right, in the records. Like the whole world can see that they're owner.
Yes, yeah. Typically. Heir property owners can also take records of how they inherited, but it's no longer necessary. Before it was. That's no longer a necessity.
Well, I think it's great. I mean, I know that the tax office really works with people, and this ability to do it without having the traditional recorded interest makes all the difference for people and their ability to use the homestead exemption.
Yeah, one other thing I'll say about the affidavit is that it doesn't have to be signed by all heirs property owners, just the ones claiming the exemption and living in the property. So there are additional, the slide only shows part of it, but underneath that there's more slots for folks to, if there's other heirs living in the home.
And thank goodness, right? Because it's sometimes tough to round up siblings to get signatures.
Yes.
Yeah.
And many banks offer free notarizing to their members. So check if your bank offers this service. But there are also state notaries. We're starting to open back up, so you can visit a state notary office.
Thank
Do
you.
we have any more? Oh, do we have any more slides?
Yes, we're going to talk a little bit about resources available.
And then I think there was a question of if no one is living in the house, then they cannot request the homestead. That is correct. If that person in order to qualify for the homestead exemption, they must have been living in the home since January 1st of the year that they're applying for. So if they're applying for the year that's coming, 2022, then they need to have lived in the home since January 1st of 2022.
And that's because this is designed to protect owners, right? Yeah, makes sense.
It's a huge tax savings. And so they only, it's a really good tax savings. So they'd only make it available in the home that you live in.
Right. Okay, well, I see that slide, but ooh, I cannot see the words on it. Can somebody, Liz, can you explain those? Because honestly, I really can't read them. My old eyes.
Yes. So some of the resources that we wanted to talk about are our Trala's housing page. On Trala's housing page, which is trla.org/housing help. On that webpage, there is a video on the homestead exemption with links to the forms that are required, as well as other resources for somebody facing a housing situation. On our housing page, there's also information on how to apply for our services. There's also different websites available for those seeking help with estate planning, somebody who wants to draft a will or needs help drafting a will or a transfer on death deed. There are toolkits available in the texaslawhelp.org website. And we will be posting those links in the chat, but are also happy to provide the links for anybody joining us by phone. If you want to just reach out to the phone number 210, actually, Ileana, if you could repeat that phone number. I'm not sure.
210-212 3703. Yeah, 210-212-3703. If you would like a copy of the PowerPoint or the link to the resources, just you can either send a text or an email or call us. Either way will work.
So I guess our big takeaway here today is that if you are not a traditional homeowner and you're an heir property owner, be careful. Be careful, research, protect yourself by being in touch with your siblings, by doing what you need to do, and by using your superpower to say no and don't sign anything. And always use the resources that are available in our community. Do we have any other resources that I'm not able to see on the teeny tiny screen I'm looking at?
There are several resources available in the Texas Law Help webpage. And there's also different clinics available at different times, as well as My City is My Home is a great nonprofit organization in San Antonio and Bexar County that assists homeowners with protesting their property taxes, as well as provides information on the homestead exemption. So reach out to My City is My Home if you are seeking help with that. Like we mentioned, rising property taxes is a huge issue, and it can be combated if you protest the property taxes. So seek help if that's the situation you're facing. If you are facing a tax foreclosure or are delinquent in taxes, contact your local tax office. They can set you up with a payment plan and assist in working something out as well. And of course, Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid offers free legal services for eligible homeowners who are interested in applying or who are in need of civil legal services.
We have some questions from attendees right now. What type of proof can someone provide? Taxes don't show ownership. How can I prove house is rightfully mine when all my family may have passed away?
So to prove, when applying for a homestead exemption, if that's what the situation you are referring to, you need to show a death certificate. So you can show a death certificate of the previous owner, the one that is listed on the deed records, and a utility bill, and then you fill out that affidavit. If you mean in terms of whether you are the only owner, then that's a little bit more tricky, because typically when an heir passes away, that heir's sons, daughters, or whoever will inherit their ownership interest. It doesn't pass on to the other folks.
Right, it gets complicated. It can get complicated when there's no will and there are multiple heirs, so to speak, because there's a lot of laws about who ends up inheriting. So I know we keep saying this, but you'll probably need to make an application with Texas Rio Grande Legal Aid so we can help you determine who the owner is and then fix the title. And it's great that you're asking, because making yourself full owner is the best way to protect against the predatory people who try to prey on heir property owners.
Okay. I have a follow-up question is, so is a sibling able to sign their interest away to someone else, a realtor, for example?
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about, is that an heir, somebody who doesn't own all of the property, can sign their interest away to somebody else. I mean, maybe a realtor, maybe, who knows, Manny, Mo, or Jack. But the consequences of that are devastating to the person who lives in the home and to the other heirs as well. And that's what this presentation is about, how to protect yourself from it. And then if it does happen, like we explained, the preference that the person who's living in the home gets, because they're living in the home for other reasons. But unfortunately, yes, when you get to that situation where a partial interest has been signed away, that's when you need help.
Thank you, Christina. What should I do when I see a city or developers walking in my property with their equipment, measuring my property uninvited?
Well, I would ask what they're doing, find out the purpose of their presence on my property. It could be legitimate, but it could not be. What I have heard quite a bit, when somebody is getting targeted by some vultures who want to try and steal the property away, they're there taking pictures. They're there, that might be what they're there for. And so unless they're there for a legitimate purpose, you can boot them off your land, ask them to get off the land. And then if necessary, call the appropriate authorities if they won't, because if they're not there for a legitimate purpose, they don't have any right to be measuring anything on your home, at your home.
Thank you. There's another question here. Besides communicating with family, if there's not that much family left around, would you suggest to also be familiar with the neighbors?
Liz, do you want to answer that? I mean, the first thing I think off the top of my head is that neighbors can be useful for affidavits of heirship, but that's the only thing that I think of. What do you think, Liz?
Yeah, I think being friendly with neighbors is always great. Create this is a community that you live in, and you want to be on good terms with the others living in it. And I know my neighbors are always looking out for me, and I'm always looking out for them. So yeah, I think it's good to have neighbors as friends, and they, sometimes you will be stuck in a situation where you have to go to court, and it may offer testimony to help you in your case. So yes, I think, yeah.
For lots of reasons, right? But the affidavit of heirship that we've brought up a few times here, you'd probably be better, Liz, to talk about it than me, but it's a document that can be used when there wasn't a will to prove ownership of property. And that affidavit, as I recall, does require signature by people who knew the original homeowner for a certain length of time, for some substantial length of time, to say they know for sure this person, owned the property and they never remarried or, did things that would affect the title of the property. So I think for purposes of protecting yourself, then a neighbor, being familiar with your neighbors would certainly be good for that as well. I think that's my 2 cents.
Yes, agreed. Affidavit of heirships are great in working out the muddiness that comes from several people owning an interest in the home, and it just makes title clearer.
Right, several generations. That's what we end up seeing. It does get pretty muddy, so we can clear it up with an affidavit of heirship. Do we have any other questions?
I'm not seeing, but I'm not sure if people, you could, maybe they're allowed to be unmuted if they want to ask a question live, or they want to continue putting it in the chat. So I'm going to give maybe a few seconds to see if anybody that's on the phone wants to ask a question, or if somebody wants to continue putting stuff in the chat. But as of right now, there's not additional questions.
Okay, well, we'll see if anybody puts anything. But, you know, for everybody who's watched this, please share it. You know, if you don't remember anything else, remember about us. You know, I mean, when all else fails, if you hear that your family or friends or neighbors or anyone near you is going through some kind of an issue having to do with a tax balance or municipal code violations, and they're worried that their home's going to get condemned, or they had a family member pass on who was living in the home, and now all those heirs are vulnerable, tell them about us. You don't have to remember all of the things that we've talked about today, but just remember that there is unfortunately a huge segment of predatory people and businesses out there that are just waiting to find out when your home is vulnerable and take it from you.
We have another question. Can TRLA check my homestead application to make sure that it's filled out correctly?
So I think we would be happy to check for you if you'd like to apply for services with us, or reach out to us so we can provide more information. And then, I will just reach out to us in that number 210-212-3703. And I think everybody is now allowed to talk. So if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself and ask it.
We've been super thorough. Oh no, here comes somebody. I couldn't read the whole question.
It says, how does an affidavit of heirship relate to stepchildren? Does it matter?
Yes, so it depends so if there is a will that passes on property to a stepchild, then it does matter, because through the will, if that will is probated and accepted by a court, they will become an heir property owner. Intestate, typically no. It becomes a little bit more complicated, but there are ways that stepchildren can relate to an affidavit of heirship.
Yeah, and intestate is one of those fancy words we lawyers like to use. It just means there was no will, like the person passed on without a will. I always joke that, you know, we would be without our jobs if we didn't have our fancy legal terms, but that's what intestate means. You know, as far as the stepchildren go, I'll give one of the fancy lawyer answers, which is it depends. I mean, it just, unfortunately, there's so many facts that we would have to ask that you actually have to apply and consult with us for us to be able to get all the facts we need to give you the right answer. But they can affect, yes, they can affect ownership, absolutely.
Okay, so that's it. Going once, going twice. Any more questions?
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. No, I have you say that to fill out the affidavit for 100% exemption, not all the members of the family have to be present, but I would imagine the witnesses would have to be like neighbors, or can they? Because sometimes at the bank, they do have people there that know you, and I mean, have had your information. They've had your address and all of that. Is that sufficient, or would I have to go to someone like, per se, a neighbor?
Well, you know what? I have to ask, are you talking about, because we've talked about a few affidavits and it sure does get confusing. Are you talking about the affidavit of residence or the affidavit of heirship? Because they're different. The affidavit of residence has to do with the homestead exemption, and the affidavit of heirship has to do with proving that the ownership of the home.
Oh, okay. Well, what if I have a will for that one?
A will for the home?
I mean, you know, that my mother left to me, to us.
Oh, okay.
That should be enough, right? No?
Are you interested in getting the homestead exemption for the home?
Yes, yes, that's what I was interested in.
So just having the will by itself doesn't, and for lack of a better way of expressing it, doesn't let the whole world know that you now own that home. You need to do something with the will. And there's different ways that you can go about. I mean, that's what we call probating the estate. And again, another fancy phrase, but probating the estate just means changing the ownership so that the whole world knows that the ownership has been changed. And there's different ways that can happen depending on the value of your home. So honestly, I would encourage you to apply to us. Liz, do you want to kick anything in?
Yeah, if it's only for purposes of the homestead exemption, fill out the affidavit form created by the controllers. That form that we showed on the screen, it's form 5114A, and you can ask the tax office for it as well. If you fill out that form, then the person living in the home who's an heir property owner just needs to sign it with the notary and submit it. And that's all that's required.
Oh, okay. I think that's where I got confused. It's TMI. I mean, it was a lot of very good information, mind you, but it's a lot of information. You know, I'm trying to write everything down, and I got behind. So that
I hear you.
I got confused. So okay, now I get it. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you guys have any follow-up questions, you can always email us at writecounsel@trla.org, or you can call us at 210-212-3703.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. I probably confused you more. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. No, it's good to know all of these things. I mean, you know, because when it happens to us, when it does happen, if it should happen, we panic, you know.
Right. And that's when we use our superpower. No. I use it a lot.
Right.
All the time.
Right.
It's my favorite word. No.
And I'm infamous for that. I'm like,
good for you.
No, let me think about it. Yeah.
All right. Liz, I think I saw something pop up about transfer of death deeds. Do you want to explain what that is, like, real quick?
Yes. So a transfer on death deed is a legal document that lets the owner choose who gets title to the home after they pass away. And if you have a transfer on death deed, your family will not have to go to court to probate a will. Like we mentioned, probate is a fancy term, just saying that you take the will to court and the court approves it. So that's what a transfer on death deed is. A great instrument that we recommend for passing property to other heirs.
Right. You know, passing property, nobody really likes to think about it. I myself am looking forward to my internal rest, but hopefully I'll remember to do something about leaving whatever's needed to so that the transfer of ownership is smooth. So there's different ways, and I guess if I'm understanding correctly, Liz, then a transfer on death deed is an alternative to actually doing a will, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
Passing on.
Yeah, for real property, right. And so the good thing about them is that the homeowner, there's no question, they get to live there until the time comes. I mean, isn't that one of the benefits of the transfer on death deed?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it doesn't transfer ownership until the death of the person.
Yeah.
We have another question. What if the sole heir is underage and there is no other family? There is no other, I'm thinking family member possessing, they can go to. Will house go to the ward or stay like the minor left behind?
So it depends. But typically it won't go to the state. It will go still towards that heir. Just who is in control of that ownership interest will depend on who is guardian or has, yeah, it gets a little more complicated.
Yeah, it definitely gets more complicated, but the minor is not going to just lose the home because they're a minor. Something is going to be happen in the middle. And so again, I'll give that hated answer. It depends. It doesn't depend. The minor will still be the owner, but how it's managed until the minor becomes an adult will depend.
Okay, so I guess it's safe to say that if you guys have any more follow-up questions, since we're getting close to 7 o'clock right now, to again, reach out to legal aid. You can do that by calling our intake line number, which is 888-988-9996, or our local number with right to counsel, as long as it's a housing issue. Our intake paralegals can assist with 210-212-3703. You could do a follow-up email by sending an email to right2counsel@trla.org. And I will put that information in the chat for you all. Just a few minutes. Okay. Are there any upcoming events that you would like to discuss, Liz?
Yes, so the city of San Antonio is holding an Heirs property, How Owners of Inherited Homesteads Can Find Help in San Antonio session. So if you are interested in attending, you can register and the links shown on the screen. And if you are joining us by phone, let us know. Happy to pass on that information to you over the phone. And this event is August 3rd, Tuesday, August 3rd from 6 to 7 p.m.
So please join us and tell other people to join us.
Oh, please join the city. That's going to be, the city will be hosting that event.
We're not participating? Oh.
No, but we have some great panelists on there. There's some great panelists who will be talking about help available.
And where is this going to be?
This is going
Held?
to be online. It's going to be held online. To register, there is a link that we are happy to send you more information about.
Don't forget to call or send me a text if you would like to get the links to the resources we mentioned today. Okay.
Okay.
Great job. Thank you guys so much for the great information.
Thank you, Commissioner. We know we did not have, straight ways to solve all your problems, but we hope it was helpful in one way or another.
Definitely, and really thank you to everybody for attending. And just remember, don't panic. Don't panic. If you are an heir and you have problems, don't panic. If you have code violations and you're having problems, don't panic. And if you're having tax problems, don't panic. Plan. Talk to somebody. Talk to us. Talk to somebody.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, everybody, for joining. Again, we hope that this information was useful to you all, and please share amongst your family members too, and start having those discussions, right? About potential heirship. Have a good evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Bye.